some point, I will figure out a way to introduce these videos. Still workshopping a lot here. But let's get started. So I wanted to do a couple of videos on the major issues before kind of diving into the specific states and the specific state legislators. I wanted to give us all a place to start. And as I had mentioned, again in that scintillating intro video, that they're kind of these four main pillars as I see them. Listen, there's a lot. There's a lot more than four. There's so much going on, but for ease, for argument's sake, I kind of see these as the big four. Democracy, won't forget that one. That's first. Wealth inequality, climate, environment. The economy? No, that falls under wealth. AI regulation, technology. Whew. Eventually, these will become just like secondhand. So, this video is on democracy. Now, I wanted to start with the economy. At first, that's kind of where I was going, or in my mind, as I was sketching these out. You know, wealth inequality is such a big issue, and it obviously touches on everybody and everything, and there's a lot to be said about it. So that felt like a natural starting point. But then I woke up one morning yesterday, and I listened to a podcast, as I do on mornings or afternoons, or evenings even, if I'm feeling wild. And it kind of put me in this mind frame about democracy and reform. And so I thought we should start there. Now, I also acknowledge that it really makes no difference to you what order I do these videos in. In all likelihood, you're just going to watch whatever happens to come across you, probably in like 3 to 5 years. But for me, I guess it sort of matters. And the reason it matters is just, I think, organizationally in terms of my thoughts. So why I came to this conclusion that we should start with democracy is because I was listening to the conversation about reform. And we've heard it before, you know, I mean, there's so much discussion over what the Democrats did wrong, what they need to do right, how they can fix it, how we've gotten here, why are we so divided, you know, and there are these prescriptions just boom, 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 right? Everyone's got a prescription. Everyone has a solution. All of the solves are out there. And everyone is talking about it, right? And we're all talking about how, you know, what we all, as though I'm part of this. They all are talking about how we got here and what we can do, and while there's value obviously in these discussions, and there's value in these prescriptions, and there's value in these solutions, I think the main problem, as I see it, is that all of these solutions and all these prescriptions operate in a world that we do not live in. So they operate assuming a foundational functionality of our government. And that's not where we're at. That was where we were at 20 years ago. Even, in 2008, even 16 years ago. I caught it. I'm acknowledging it. But we're not there now. Okay? Our government is not actually functional right now. So you can't have all of these prescriptions and reforms and solutions when we can't have, and when we don't have any way of executing those. So that's what this big disconnect is. Oh, I'm going to talk about the solutions because, as I said, there's value to that, right? And there's value to discussing kind of what we can do to get us out of the current state. But I also want to talk about how we get out of our dysfunction. And I know that a lot of those are overlapping, right? And it's all kind of molded on top of one another, right? And you can't actually pull out one thing and say like, oh, if we do this, this will fall, and then this will fall, and then this will fall. It's not realistic. It's not how the world works in our gorgeous chaos. So the point that I'm trying to make is that in order to get a more functional government, very, very foundational things need to change. Now, this is a lot of people's argument, right? I'm not existing in a bubble and pulling these out of nowhere. I listen to podcasts. I also read, and I am very well educated and informed. But the two main arguments, as I see them on this side, on the solutions side, right, we've got tyranny of the minority, which, as I mentioned, it's these two Harvard professors, Ziblatt and Zablinski. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to those people. Daniel Ziblatt, I want to say. David Ziblatt. It's called Tyranny of the Minority. And I apologize profusely for not remembering your names. I don't remember names very well. At some point in my childhood, I decided that I was going to be good at remembering numbers and bad at remembering names, and so here we are. So we've got the Harvard professor men, Tyranny of the Minority, and we've got Jill Lepore, whose name I do remember because I've been recently listening to her audiobook. And she does the audio, and so it's lovely. I feel like I have a personal relationship with her, even though, obviously, I don't. Her book, We the People, is a story of the Constitution. And it's a story of the Constitution through the amendment process. And I think when you take these two arguments and kind of bring them together, that's essentially the solutions, right? So our Harvard guys are basically saying that we have minority rule in this country, and the reason we have minority rule is because the Constitution was set up that way. Which, I mean, duh, right? Like, I don't think that this is you're right, I'm sorry. I'm sure people will argue it. But it essentially was. It wasn't, the Constitution didn't give everybody the right to vote. This wasn't something that they were like, how do we get more people to vote, right? They didn't. They didn't want women to vote. They didn't want Black people to vote. So, and it very specifically said that. They didn't even want men who didn't own property to vote. So really the Constitution was set up to give a very small amount of people, a minority, if you will, a say in our government. Now, over the years, we've evolved as a society. We now know that it's wrong to enslave people. And as such, the Constitution has changed to allow such crazy things as women voting and Black people owning property and voting. However, and this is Miss Lepore's argument, it hasn't changed enough. It's amended very, very infrequently. It's something like, I think the last amendment was in the 70s, and that was sort of like a stupid amendment. It was like congressional pay or something silly like that. So there hasn't been a real meaningful amendment in the Constitution in decades. And that's the problem, right? This is kind of like the crux of the problem, is that the Constitution was built to be amended. Because if things don't change, they don't grow. If they don't grow, they decay. It's kind of as simple as that, right? And the founders knew this. They knew that they were infallible, which is the hilarity of the fact that we now treat them as though they were gods among men when they weren't. They were men, and they were slave-owning men, and they were women-hating men. Not all of them, obviously. I'm generalizing. But the point is that this document that we have put up on a pedestal and revered so dearly wasn't supposed to not change. It was supposed to change. Because the world changes. We grow. We expand. We do all kinds of things. And they knew that. And we know that. And what we have now is a document that has the same, or not the same, but very, very similar constraints and laws and regulations that existed 250 years ago. But we live in a different world. We've grown. Population has grown. Technology has grown. Cities have grown. It's grown, right? And as such, we need to have a document that grows along with it. We need to have, not just a document, but rules, laws, regulations, societal norms that grow along with it. So this is where we're at, right? We have this fragile document, brittle, I believe as Jill Lepore calls it, that makes it very, very hard for anything to get done because it hasn't changed. This is where our tyranny of the minority comes in, right? And these guys have basically said that they've laid out like the 15 things that need to happen in order for us to get back to a system of government that represents the majority, or really just represents like people. Like at this point, the only people that the government is representing are rich. Yeah, that's it. That's right. It's like they're just representing the rich people. And not even like just rich people, like insanely rich people. And so what are their reforms? So the reforms are like pretty obvious, right? It's, abolish the electoral college, make the Senate more proportional, term limits, expand the number of justices, expand the number of representatives in the House, did I say that? Make the Senate proportional? I don't remember. Public funding of elections. So it's stuff like that, right? To name just a few. And none of these are crazy. Like they're not, again, no one's going to be like, abolish the electoral college. That's insane. No, it's insane that it exists, right? It's also insane that there are still 470 representatives. So a lot of these things make a lot of sense. And they're backed by a lot of people in this country. The problem is that they don't happen. And why they don't happen is because our government is dysfunctional. So we're stuck in this kind of death loop, right? Where we want to do the reforms to make our government functional, but in order to pass these reforms, we need a functional government. So here we are. Catch 22, if you, you will. We're all living in one big, glorious catch 22. So, how do we get out of this doom loop? My, idea is that we go through the states and we allow the states to kind of pass a lot of these reforms, and eventually it'll trickle up to Congress and the federal government. Now, obviously, this isn't a plan that's going to happen in like the next election cycle. This is long term. We're talking long term here. But that's just it, right? Is that the Democrats haven't had a long term plan. The Republicans have wiped the floor in terms of long term planning. As I said, red map, genius. But the Democrats haven't been great about it. So it's going to take a minute. It's going to take a decade. And that's just kind of where we're at. That being said, it's super attainable. Because none of these things are radical. Amending the Constitution might sound like a radical idea, but it's really not. I mean, it's the only way that this country has functioned up until now. Like there was a civil war, and then Black people got to vote. Like, I'm jumping ahead, skipping a couple steps here. But that's the thing, right? Is that the amendments are the way that this country grows and evolves. And so that's what we need. Was it mend to amend or amend by amend? I don't know. Workshopping that tagline here. I think also that's probably from Jill Lepore's book. Mend through amendment, maybe. Sounds good. Yeah, so anyway, so that's where we're at. And I guess the point is, again, that in order to get anything done higher level, like in order to really pass massive reform, public investment in infrastructure, climate change, AI regulation, we have to get some form of majority representation back. I think a lot of people would say that the biggest and most profound thing that can be done is to get money out of campaigns. And that's a pretty low-hanging fruit. And again, not crazy. I mean, the crazy thing is how much money is spent during these campaigns. Like that's the heartbreak in all of this, is that we're now having billions of dollars being funneled between rich people, because really it's like rich people give it to campaigns who then spend money on advertising. It's just advertising, which it basically goes to Google and Facebook, Meta, and Amazon, and the broadcast networks, right? Fox, CBS, ABC, and they're wealthy cronies, and then they make a lot more money, and then they spend more money to get the people that they want elected who are going to do the things that they want to make them more money. Again, doom loop cycle. And that's the real tragedy, right? Is that while they're arguing over how in the world are we going to pay for people or human beings to have health care, they're also trading around billions and billions and billions of dollars to keep it so that people don't get health care. And it's so crazy. And it's so insane that this is how our government functions, that people have stopped questioning it. Or not, I'm sorry. People have not stopped questioning it. A lot of people question it. Nobody thinks this is appropriate. Nobody thinks this is right, but they've just kind of accepted the fact that it is what it is, and this is the way that it works. And this is kind of the only way for it to work. And so the first step is to be like, no, this is not the only way for it to work. It can work a different way. It doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to spend billions and billions of dollars on these horrible ads. They're horrible also. Nobody enjoys them. Talk to somebody who lives in Pennsylvania about what their lives are like when they try to watch TV during an election year. And it's brutal, No, again, nobody wants this. Nobody wants these constant barrage of fear-mongering, awful, awful ads telling us how terrible the other person is. It's ugly and unnecessary. Just tell us what you stand for. What you stand for is amending the Constitution, among other things. So that's it. That's democracy in a nutshell. Done and done. I'm sure there are questions. I skipped a lot. I get it. I know, as I said, I'm not a professor. And I know there's more, and at some point I will probably maybe not.